Hello everyone and welcome to Ask Kochie on this Wednesday. Bit out of sync, but following the session yesterday when I asked whether you wanted another update today at this time. Asking for your feedback if you wanted more information. There was a fair bit of consensus that yes, that people were interested in a daily update of what's happening with your money and with small business and what's happening around the place. Let's, before we get into Scott Morrison's press conference today, which I thought was pretty impressive, let's take a look at what's happening with the markets, even though Wall Street was up just under 5% last night, because now it looks as though Donald Trump is going to release an economic stimulus package. Remember, last couple of days I've been saying, I've coined the phrase, where the bloody hell are you, Donald Trump? Because everywhere else in the world is putting together stimulus packages for different economies, not the United States. There is now talk saying there's going to be a $1 trillion economic stimulus package, with the US government possibly giving every citizen $1,000 cash to go and spend immediately. Now, that's very much like, as we mentioned yesterday, Kevin Rudd's plan for what happened in the GFC, the Rudd government's cash splash, the sugar hit to the economy early. A lot of countries are doing that around the world, because even if you don't like his politics, even if you don't like the bloke at all, economic history is showing that the Rudd answer to the GFC was absolutely right. So you don't need to like the bloke, but apparently the plan, which was Treasury's plan, to be fair, the gurus in the Federal Treasury Department put that together. So our market, American share market, up substantially. We're down today, largely because there is the whole reaction to Scott Morrison basically locking down our borders from anyone coming in, and the impact that will continue to have on travel and entertainment and hospitality, the limiting of indoor gatherings to 100 people or less, the consequences of that. So while Scott Morrison was very clear today on explaining exactly the health restrictions they're including, the market is now digesting what that really means for stocks and for profits going forward. Interestingly, Westpac, Bill Evans, who's the Westpac chief economist, has come out and he's forecasting unemployment in Australia to rise to 7% by October. He's saying the recession will have a tiny calendar year expansion of the economy, but for the first half of the year, he's expecting that economic growth will go backwards by about 1%. So the March and June quarters, 1% contraction of the economy. He's expecting sort of a 1.2, 1.3% expansion in the second half of the year. So over a 12-month basis, we'll be slightly ahead, but a dip in the first 6 months and then a bounce back and recovery in the second 6 months. Aussie dollar has hit a 17-year low today, just over 59 US cents. Now remember what that does. A low Australian dollar means the cost of imports will be more expensive, cost of going overseas on holidays will be more expensive, but it makes our exports a whole lot more competitive, because it makes our exports cheaper on international markets after the conversion rate. So at a time of economic uncertainty and a recession, a low Aussie dollar is really good for us in terms of the economy in getting back, because we are a trading nation. We depend on our exports going overseas. And remember, when Scott Morrison's talking about a lockdown of the country, it's just people, it's not trade. So we want our exports to keep going out. There's signs that the Chinese economy is heading back towards normal, that they've got over their coronavirus fears. Factories are up and going again. So if we can start exporting to an improving Chinese economy. That will be good for us going forward. Virgin has suspended its international flights. No sort of surprise there. We all expected that. A lot of companies now, because remember on the share market, companies have to constantly update their earnings forecasts. So there's continuous, it's called continuous disclosure in the share market. Well, a lot of companies are now withdrawing their latest forecast for earnings and saying the future is too uncertain to do it. So whereas some of your stocks may have said, our earnings are looking good for the next 12 months, and they said that a month ago, now they're withdrawing that statement and saying, look, it's so uncertain, we're not quite sure how it's going to go. So that's a bit of a wrap up of what's going on at the moment. Supermarkets, of course, their share prices are holding pretty steady. That's because of the rush of buying within supermarkets. And I think some of them now are putting limits on everything you can buy after Scott Morrison just chastised us, I suppose, today, saying just stop it. It's un-Australian. There's no need for it. The supply chain is there. There is plenty of food to go around. We're not going to lock down the country. He quite clearly said, you know, because a lot of people are saying, hey, close all businesses, close everything, send everyone home for 2 to 4 weeks. He quite clearly said today that will not happen because that's not an answer. It has not been shown to be effective anywhere else in the world. You can't just close a country, close businesses for 2 to 4 weeks, and then at the end of it, think, oh, everything will bounce up and everything will be rosy again. It won't. And he really did reiterate that this issue will not go away for another 6 months. So we are going to go through these tough times for at least 6 months. And I think a message that it's saying to me is that I can't help, and I'm not trying to be unkind here, but I can't help but think a lot of businesses who are sending all their staff home to work from home at the moment are thinking that if you do that for 2 weeks, it'll be fine. It will break the back of the coronavirus pandemic and we'll all go back to normal. I don't think that will happen. And you've got to think through when you bring everyone back, how does it impact your culture? If you're dealing with this for 6 months, what does it do to relationships internally and also with customers? I think you've got to think very carefully before saying we're going to just have remote working for all our staff, because it's going to last a lot longer than you think it's. I get the feeling a lot of people almost see it as an adventure at the moment. Something we'll deal with 4 weeks, we'll be back to normal. It's not going to be the case. It's going to be 6 months. It's going to be a lot longer, so we're going to have to get used to it. Very similar to the message from the Chief Medical Officer today on schools. You know, there's a lot of pressure. A lot of Australian parents go, shut schools down now. Well, overseas, that's proven not to be the case, not to be the best way of doing it. So I think we've got to take the advice of the experts. It could be counterintuitive to us as sort of people who are not experienced in health issues. It might not play to our personal biases, but I think we've got to realise that there are other people who are really expert in this, who are driving it. Even Robert Boy, who I reckon, Professor Robert Boy, is the best infectious diseases person in Australia, bar none. There was a story on the front page of the Australian today saying, so there's a report Singapore is finding that the coronavirus is weakening its strain. I put it to him. He said, absolutely not. That's absolutely wrong. And even he is saying sending kids to school is not the right thing to do. Contain it, keep kids together. They're the least affected. Make sure they have the proper hygiene, sort of disciplines and processes. But, you know, it's better to have them there under a strict discipline sort of process than, you know, out in the streets or putting pressure on families, two-income families, on how they're looked after. All right, let's start taking some of your calls. Shubda's here today to feed me the questions. What have we got, Shubda?
Darren has asked, how long do you think businesses should prepare for before things get better? Is there any news on whether New South Wales businesses rent will get compensated?
Okay. All right. How long before things will get better? As I just, in terms of being a small business owner, I think it's going to be 6 months that we're going to have to battle through this. I was a little disappointed. Hopefully, it comes soon. That the press conference of the Prime Minister today didn't include another economic stimulus package. I think that's we're all waiting on that. New South Wales is suspending payroll tax, which is a bit of a relief for small business owners. The government needs to come back with a bigger package. Overnight, the UK had a $600 billion package, as I mentioned before. It was really interesting. I'm a big fan of a bloke called Bernard Keane, who's an economist and writer for the Kochie newsletter, and talking about thinking outside the square. He did a piece yesterday in Kochie, which is a daily newsletter about politics and money and economy and media and things like that. And he was saying, I think I mentioned it this time yesterday, that the total salary bill per quarter in Australia for private businesses, don't count public service or hospitals or healthcare or schools, education, because that's generally government payments, but private salaries, $125 billion a quarter. So if an economic stimulus package came and said, the government said, we'll pay half your staff's salary for a quarter, $65 billion, then that would sort of really focus the attention of a lot of small business owners to keep staff on the payroll rather than shed when there's not much money coming in. That would, if you did that, according to Bernard and his calculations, if you borrowed that money, basically zero interest rates, why doesn't the government just go and raise money through 30-year bonds and pay 0% interest? Not a bad deal at the moment. It would lift government debt to the size of the economy to 26%, which is easily manageable. So I think it needs some of that big thinking. If we get big thinking, maybe it will turn around quicker. Next one, Shilda.
Next one's from Tonya, who's asked, what advice would you have for a 64-year-old business owner who, without a lifetime of superannuation in the tank?
Okay, what would I advise for a 64-year-old business owner with no superannuation? Start working out how to build value into your business, so that you get good value when you actually sell it. I have constantly said over the years, nothing scares me more than a small business owner who says, I don't need superannuation, my business is my super. Because you're facing a situation now, which is every business owner's nightmare. They think their small business is worth an amount which they were hoping to fund their retirement. Then an issue like this comes along, which erodes the value of your business to much lower than you thought because buyers aren't prepared to pay what you expected, and it's going to affect your retirement. I cannot stress enough how important it is for small business owners to build off business assets, off business investments, just like farmers build off-farm income by putting up a cabin and getting tourist dollars out of it. I think as business owners, we've got to do the same thing. Now, that's either stashing a heap of money into superannuation regularly, pay yourself super, contribute to super like you do for your staff, or build investments outside of super, but outside your business as well. So you de-risk your personal wealth away from being tied to your business. And I think it's a really good lesson for everyone. If you're in that situation at the moment, you've just got to ride it through, and you might end up having to be in your business and working longer for a lot longer than you expected. But instead of trying to sell the business next year and retire, you might have to do a couple of extra years while the economy gets back on its feet, your business starts to recover, and the value starts to come back into it for somebody to pay a bit more for it. And next one, Shilda.
Next one's from Chris, who's asked, Why is there no stimulus package for sole traders?
Okay, Chris, no, I totally agree with you. Sole traders, freelancers, things like that. If you're a sole trader, sort of I call a solo entrepreneur, I cannot recommend enough the website flyingsolo.com.au. It is a website resource hub information purely for solo entrepreneurs on how to run your business, how to build clients, how to market, how to manage the accounts, how to invest, take money out of your business to invest in your private name, all that sort of thing. And Flying Solo has been doing a great job over the last 2 weeks, purely giving advice to solo entrepreneurs how to handle this downturn. So flyingsolo.com.au, I got to declare it's part of my family business here. One of our titles, Startup Daily, the Business Builders platform, and Flying Solo is a separate one. Flying Solo is purely for you. So go and take a look at that and all the information there. But so far, there's really been no direct assistance for you. I think it will come in the next stimulus package because I think that message has got loud and clear to the government, and freelancers, consultants, solo entrepreneurs. There are a lot more of you than I think the government thought. So it's on the way. Next one, Shubha.
Jeffrey has asked, is this the right time to invest in property? I'm looking at buying my first house as a self-employed small business owner, but I'm a bit unsure.
Is it the best time to buy property? You're self-employed business owner, want to go into your first property. Look, to be completely honest, and you've got to get your own, as I constantly say on this Facebook Live, I can only give you thought starters. I can't give you advice, would never pretend to give you advice. I can give you things to think about, but you've got to go and get your own personal individual advice. Now, when you're making this consideration, you've got to think about state of the property market, what sort of property you're going to buy in which region. Okay, so you've got to tick all of those boxes and make sure that they look attractive. On the other side of it, as a small business owner, you've got to say, all right, now economy is pretty uncertain. Bill Evans, chief economist at Westpac, is predicting a recession. Standard & Poor's are predicting a global recession, so it's not just Australia, so it's overseas as well. They've done that this morning. What's the impact of a tough 6 months on my business? Because you're a business owner as well. Will that affect my ability to service a loan for a property purchase? So am I comfortable that my business is going to go well over the next 6 months? Well enough that I can afford a big property commitment. Now, only you can make that decision. But I think that's how you weigh up whether you can actually do the transaction, because they're both linked. Your ability to actually earn money out of your business and making sure that won't be affected to service a big commitment over here. Next one, Shubha.
Renee has asked, how will this affect SMSF?
How will this affect self-managed superannuation funds? Interestingly, I did a podcast this morning for NAB Trade, for Gemma Dale, who I've known for a long time, who looks after the SMSFs for NAB Trade. We're having an interesting discussion at the moment because their platform, their website's crashing at the moment, and volumes have tripled. And she's saying it's been quite interesting, the number of people who have been buying the dips, have been seeing this as a buying opportunity, the big crashes on the market, to buy good stock. And I can see the logic of it, because investment history says to us that people who buy into times of crisis, times of fear, usually do better over the long run. It's a big call, and you've got to have a fair bit of self-confidence to commit to that, because you don't know how much further the market will go down, or if it will go down, and how steep the recovery will be. SMFs who have big exposure to the share market, of course, naturally will be being hit at the moment. So it depends on how big a proportion of your portfolio is in shares, and obviously you'll follow the share market down. Whether to use this as an opportunity to buy in at low prices, I think I told you the advice of my brother yesterday, who was explaining to my nieces and nephews, who were saying, "Oh, is this a good time to buy?" And I think he quite wisely said, "Look, if you've got $10 to invest in the share market, invest $3 now in the hope it's at the bottom of the market, and then just wait to see how it goes. Just don't jump in all at once and just invest the 10, the full $10, because it's too scary. It's too uncertain at the moment. Who knows what's going to happen? Could be the bottom, may not be, but maybe just test it and do it gradually." Next one, Sean.
Di has asked, my son has a fitness rehab and performance business, and only last week purchased the empty building next to him to expand. Documents have been signed, but many people are choosing not to turn up. Money is put aside to expand. Should he continue or sit tight?
So he's actually bought the
building next door.
Bought the building next door to expand his business.
Yeah. Until last week, he was planning this.
As of last week, signing it last week. And of course, with his business at the moment, because it's fitness-based and gym-based, you've got people not turning up. It's a really hard one. I think he's really got to talk to his accountant on this to find out what shape the business is in. If he stretched himself to buy the business next door, buy the building next door and geared up to a high level, I think he's got to talk to his bank about it, whoever he borrowed it against, and just say, and look, banks will work with you as long as you have a plan with them and can explain what you're doing in your business. And it's one of the things the government has said to the banks, is to be pretty flaming understanding of your small business customers over the next 6 months or so. Because they're doing poorly isn't because they're bad business people. It's just like the economy, like we're pretty good economic managers as a government, but this thing has just come out of the blue and hit us. So try and work with your small business customers. So I would touch base with the financier first and just explain the situation to them. They already know, but just making sure they understand that you may need help going forward. Then start to think about how else can you leverage your business so that if people aren't turning up because it's indoor and might be capable of having more than 100 people, and people aren't meant to congregate with more than 100. I go to a big gym that there's more than 100 people there. I don't know what's happening to them when I go to my session tomorrow. But I know a lot of private gym owners are doing classes in parks now and thinking a bit outside the square. So maybe think about other ways that you can generate cash using your equipment. It might be renting your equipment out. I know one gym, Monique Wright from Sunrise, was telling us today her gym is saying, well, if anyone wants to rent any of the equipment out at home for a month, things like that. How can you use the equipment you've got, your reputation, to generate income a different way than people coming to you? So think it through, but talk to your financier. If you've made big purchase, big financial commitment, and you're under pressure, let them know and work through it together. Next one, Shubha.
Vic is asking, when is a good time to fix interest rates for residential mortgage or investment property? Or is it better to always go variable?
Yeah, variable versus fixed home loan rates. It doesn't need to be variable or fixed. It can be a cocktail of both. Remember, the attractions of being fixed is that if there's a rise in interest rates, you're insulated from it, but you can't pay a fixed generally. In most fixed rate home loans, you can't pay them off early. Variable, your home loan rate is susceptible to changes in official interest rates, either up or down, and you can pay them off early. So what a lot of people do is do a mixture of both. Have a proportion of their home loan financing in a fixed mortgage so that you've got certainty, you can budget on that repayment, and then they have a proportion in a variable rate where they try and put in all their extra savings and pay it down early. So usually a cocktail is the way to go. Where will interest rates go? They're going to go down again. I would say the Reserve Bank will probably not wait until the first Tuesday of next month to cut interest rates again. There's talk that they might cut another 0.25% of official interest rates tomorrow. And both Philip Lowe and Guy Debelle, the Governor and Deputy Governor of the Reserve Bank, over recent weeks have said interest rates are going to stay low for a long time. We're talking years here, a year, 2 years maybe. So there is no sign of any increases in interest rates. We could be getting to a stage where they're getting as low as they can go. They can go into negative. Now, some people think, wow, that's strange. How can you have negative interest rates? But Japan, it's terrible for an economy. It really shows an economy is terrible if you go into negative interest rates, and it's really hard. It's almost as damaging as having really high interest rates. But I don't think we'll go negative here in Australia. They'll cut to 0.25% official interest rates, and then as the Reserve Bank did today, pumping money into the market. They did today and they did last Friday as well to make sure the banks have enough liquidity to meet any demands from their customers. Next one, Shubha.
Next one's from Peter, who's asked, I'm a casual worker in before and after school care. If schools close, I will lose my job. What can I do?
Yeah. Aftercare worker at a school, if schools close, your job would certainly be in jeopardy. The Chief Medical Officer and the Prime Minister were pretty strong today, saying at this stage schools are not going to close, and they are reticent to close them anytime soon. They're saying even in Wuhan, which is the epicenter of the coronavirus outbreak, the closing schools didn't work. And it was better to keep schools open. So not saying that opinion might not change in the future, but at this stage, the government is very, very firm. And in fact, the Prime Minister warned parents who are getting all very antsy about this, saying, lock the schools down, I want to take my kids out. He was saying to parents, don't panic, take the advice of the medical professionals. May be different to what you think, take their advice. So for the foreseeable future, I think your job's okay. Now, if it comes into jeopardy, what happens if schools close down? We have the highest in Australia participation rate virtually in the world of people working, the highest percentage of people working, a lot of two-income families. So what happens with if kids are home from school, one of the parents, or both of the parents have to juggle, do I give up work? Do I take holidays? What happens? Because someone's got to look after the kids. So maybe there's an opportunity with the parents of the kids you're looking after at the moment at after school care is to just quietly sort of suggest or quietly make them aware that, hey, if schools do close, you're open to help them out or to be hired, or for one family or two families or three families to look after their kids for them. So start thinking about the situation of those parents if the school's closed down and whether you can help them out and earn some money that way. Next one, Shubha.
Next one from Kate, who's asked, what is your top advice for trades-based businesses? What do you predict
For what businesses?
Trades-based businesses.
Right, what? I haven't, a trade-based businesses. Not sure what a trade-based business is. Send it back to us. Is trading trade space is, just write back and clarify what a trade space business is. Let's take another question in the meantime.
Next question is from Susan, who's asked, how are aged pensioners meant to go out to spend their stimulus money when it arrives if they can barely leave their homes?
Yeah, that's such a good point. How can aged pensioners spend their $750 if they can't leave their home? And look, I hear where you're coming from because I've got an 85-year-old mum. I check in with her every day, and she's got a similar issue with this. It's scary for senior Australians. And you need to not really self-isolate, because I asked one of the top medicos, should senior Australians self-isolate? And he was going, no, lead your life, but understand hygiene, don't touch surfaces, and social distancing. This social distancing is so important. So go to the shops, but don't get within 1.5 meters of a person down an aisle or whatever. So you can still go out and spend, but just do it sensibly. And still reinforce today, hygiene, antiseptic, wash your hands, social distancing, don't touch public surfaces, and if you go to the shops and spend it, you could probably do that. So, but I certainly understand the fears that you have. Next one, Shubha.
Denise has asked, why did middle-income earners with no children not get a mention for health insurance?
Why didn't middle-income earners with children get anything for the economic stimulus package? Because it all went to welfare recipients. Hear you. I think the government hears you as well. I think you will be part of the next stimulus package as well. The government's argument would be, hey, we're trying to protect your jobs. We focused on welfare recipients because there's a payment system that the money can go straight into easily, and we know they're going to spend it. And we focused on small business to make sure that they don't shed too many jobs. Now, as it's turned out, I haven't spent enough on small business, but that family sector, the household sector, your sector, not much came for that. But again, I think that could change. And I wouldn't mind betting. See, they're still caught up in politics a bit, because remember, because they bagged Kevin Rudd so much because of the GFC response, which put Australia into budget deficit for many years. And that's fair enough. We need a lot of money to cushion us from the GFC, just the same as they're going to need a lot of money to cushion us from this coronavirus recession. So, but that's what budgets are all about. The reason you're in budget surplus is because you've taken more money from us as a government in tax than you needed to. So you've rebuilt the budget. Now we're in another crisis. We want our money back to help us get through it. And that's what good government is all about. But the problem is, and I thought this was a mistake in the first stimulus package, when Scott Morrison said this is not going to be like a cash splash Rudd government just giving money to anyone. I thought, don't bring the politics into it. Just forget about what happened in the GFC. Don't try and justify your negativity in the years since that, for 10 or 11 years. This is a new crisis. We don't want any politics in it. Take the politics out of it. Because you've got all these governments overseas doing exactly that, cash splash, because it proves to work. So don't back yourself into a corner. But I think families and middle income and households will get something in this next package, which will be bigger than the last one. And next one, sir.
Kate's clarified she meant tradies, businesses with tradies.
Oh, with tradies, with tradesmen. Okay, so a bit of a typo in the question there. I was thinking, I thought I knew most businesses, trade spaces. You're in a tradies business, and the question was,
what is your top advice for
tradies?
Businesses?
For tradies-based businesses, I always say that the best thing for tradies is a mobile payment system. That when you get out to be called as a tradie, get called out for a job, and you do a job, you get payment then and there with using a mobile EPOS machine or transaction machine, a Square machine or whatever, so that you get paid straight away rather than having to send an invoice and then wait for money to come back. I think for cash flow, that is my top bit of advice for tradies, is to be technology savvy so that you can get payment then and there when the job's finished. And that's the best thing for cash flow, because most business owners, including tradies, are terrible with admin, terrible with issuing invoices, not so good with chasing up money either. So, and that solves the issue for you. Next one.
Robin has asked, is it the right time to pay off my mortgage with my super?
Is it the right time to pay off your mortgage with your super? So you've obviously retired and can get access to your superannuation. Look, I don't know because I don't know your personal circumstances, but a couple of things to ponder. Home loan's pretty cheap at the moment. Interest rates is pretty low. So there's cheap money. The home loan rate is going to get cheaper. There's no doubt about that. With interest rates coming down, if you took your money out of your super and your super was invested in the share market, you've taken a really big hit on it. So you're taking that money out when hopefully the share market is pretty low, 30% down on what it was a month ago. So I think you've got to weigh that up. Are you taking money out of your super at the wrong time after taking a hit and not letting it recover? And are you paying off a loan which is actually pretty good value and really cheap at the moment? So that's the decision you've got to weigh up. And look, I'm not against borrowing. I'm not against loans at all, as long as those loans are used for productively, that you don't borrow for consumption, if you like. You don't borrow to fund your lifestyle, to go out to dinner or do holidays. I don't like borrowing for that, but I do like people borrowing for good decisions, like investing in assets like property or whatever. And that's why I'm saying with the government, gee, you raise money, they issue government bonds, you'd be paying 1% interest or 1% return on them at the moment, and use that money to spend on infrastructure and keep people in jobs. For me, that's a really good deal. So don't be afraid to borrow. Just make sure what you're borrowing for is attractive. All right, I think we've got one more.
Okay. We've got quite a few. So last one here, Lara has asked, my small business just lost a large order that is ongoing due to coronavirus. What can we do?
You've just lost a large order because of coronavirus. Believe me, you're not alone. In my business, we've had customers now delaying decisions for a couple of weeks that we thought were going to be made this week. We're all in the same boat. Number one, if it's going to put your business under financial strain, you've got to talk to your financiers if you've got loans. Got to talk to your bank and inform them. And see if you've got access to any lines of credit that can get you through with the cash flow issues. or you've got to look at all your costs in your business, your cost base, and see if you can prune those costs to insulate you from if it's a dire financial impact from a regular customer cancelling an order. Well, it's not the customer's fault. It's the fault of the scenario. Keeping good terms with them, because they will come back if you treat them right when the economy and conditions start to improve. So you've got to keep relationships going, but we're all going to be under pressure and in exactly the same boat as you. So look at the cost base of your business, see what you can prune, see what you can do without, and look at other ways to build sales. Maybe if a big customer's cancelled an order, maybe put that out to other customers and say, look, we've had a cancellation of an order. As a result, we've got to ship these goods. We'll cut the price 20% for 2 days if people want to come in and buy it. Start thinking those ideas. For established business, I talked about flying solo before for solo entrepreneurs, but our Business Builders website, which is for small businesses from, say, 4 or 5 employees up, lots of information there on how to think laterally in terms of sales and marketing, and how to cushion yourself from the coronavirus. So kochiesbusinessbuilders.com.au, flyingsolo.com.au as well is the other one. All right, I'm starting to go hoarse a bit now after doing the program this morning. Look, we've had, I think, quite a few questions still to go. As I say, I usually do this every Tuesday at 1:30. I'm happy during this period for the time being to have these sessions every day. If you want, give me feedback. If you'd like another one tomorrow, just let me know. I'm sort of at call for you if you want me to do it. But go on the Facebook page and just let me know whether you want me to come back tomorrow and we can discuss it further, discuss your questions further, try and give you some guidance on them, and I can keep you up to date with the latest of what's happening. All right. Keep well, uncertain times, stick together, and also be nice to each other.